Hey, Matt and Jessa, we are waiting right now to see if we can pull together a quorum. We are down a couple commissioners here, so if you want to hold tight, we will have an update for you as soon as we hear.
No worries. I wondered if that was the case.
Yeah,
All right.
stay
Yeah,
tuned.
we will stay tuned. We'll hang tight. No worries.
Thank you.
Yep.
Oh, just an update for everybody on the screen. We will be resuming this in just about 2 minutes here. We have somebody logging in here, so we're almost ready to go.
All right, great. We got a quorum. Here we go. All righty. Thank you, everyone. Planning Commission meeting, February 5th, 2026. I call this meeting to order. May we please have the roll call?
Steve Light is absent. Melissa Alvarado is absent. Jared Gossin is absent. Maria Pena. Here. Harry Pippenich.
Here.
Woody Cornett.
Here.
John Grant.
Here.
Thank you. All righty. Pledge of allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next is the approval of the agenda. If all commissioners present have reviewed the agenda, may I please have a motion to approve and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Excellent. That has been moved and seconded. All in favor of approving the agenda, raise your right hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Next is the approval of the minutes. I don't think we have a quorum to approve the minutes because it was just me and you. Were you here? Did you zoom in on that? Okay. So we'll move on to that. We'll have to approve the minutes for the next. Please move the approval of the meeting minutes from the December 18th meeting to our next meeting, please. Excellent. The next topic is public comment. During this portion of the meeting, anyone may speak on any subject that does not later appear on the agenda. 5 minutes per person will be allowed. And I don't see any public in the Zoom audience or here, so we'll move on from that. Next is the legislative public hearing. Excuse me. Now is the time specified for the commission to conduct a legislative public hearing to consider the following matter. Consideration of comprehensive plan amendment application number 58-25, City of the Dalles. Recommendation to City Council for adoption of the employment opportunities analysis and employment buildable lands inventory and amendments to Goal 9 economic development of the Dalles Comprehensive Land Use Plan. This hearing requires the commission to consider explanation of the relevant criteria, standards, policies, and laws, a statement of basic facts relied upon in rendering the decision, and the evidence in the record. The criteria on which the commission will base its consideration of this matter are found in the city's comprehensive plan, the Dalles Municipal Code Title 10, and the staff report. Anyone who wishes to testify must be recognized by me before testifying. When I recognize you, please proceed to the microphone and state your name and mailing address for the record. The hearing is also required to be recorded. Generally, the public hearing procedure will go as follows. Prior to the public meeting, we will begin with the staff report and any questions the commission may have for staff. Next, I will ask for testimony from anyone who wishes to offer relevant testimony or ask relevant questions on this matter, limited to no more than 3 minutes per testifier. After all public testimony, staff will have an opportunity to respond. When this process has been concluded, I will close public testimony and the commission will deliberate toward the decision. To expedite the hearing, commissioners may ask questions of persons as they testify, and I may conclude or limit cumulative, repetitious, or immaterial testimony consistent with the Planning Commission bylaws. Some important standards apply during the hearing. First, if you testify, please address your testimony to the applicable criteria or other criteria which the person believes applies to the decision from the Comprehensive Plan or Dalles Municipal Code Title 10. Second, failure to raise an issue with enough detail to allow the commissioners and the parties an opportunity to respond to that issue prohibits an appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals on that specific issue. Third, failure to participate in this public hearing, either orally or in writing, precludes appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals. Do any members of the commission wish to make any conflict of interest disclosure or abstain from participating or voting on this matter because of possible financial gain resulting from this legislative action?
Nope.
No.
No for me also. Thank you. The public hearing is now open. May we please have the staff report?
Good evening. Good evening, Chair Cornett. Commissioners, thank you. Joshua Chandler, Community Development Department. I am joined this evening by Matt Hasty and Jessa Miller with MIG. They're going to assist me. We're going to have a kind of a tandem presentation here. A lot of the material here will be covered on their end, more in depth. The staff report really is kind of a high level that goes into the overall process of the EOA and the BLI. So I'll kind of touch on that a little bit and then pass it over to them. Then after that, we'll take some questions at the end just so we can move this along. So as mentioned, you are considering recommendation to City Council for the adoption of the EOA. Ultimately, this is a project many years in the making. It started in 2019. We did some work in 2019, 2020. The commission ultimately recommended approval to City Council, and at that time in 2022, City Council decided not to adopt it. Because there was some additional information that was really needed that they felt needed to be addressed. In that period of time, we see some substantial development occur out on the port. One of those being Google's current under construction data center, which is a 90-acre data center. So that really kind of tipped the scales of available land in our overall inventory. There's also some other developments that have happened in that period of time. And then also 2019 to 2022, that information, a lot of things have happened in that period of time, obviously a global pandemic. So there's a lot of shifting and changing that really occurred in the economic sphere. So some updates to that were warranted. So in response, beginning in 2025, the city initiated the EOA process with MIG. MIG was part of the process initially with their a former company that was kind of absorbed into MIG, Angelo Planning Group. Matt was the project manager at that time as well, so he has a wealth of information here. The update to the EOA is something, like I said, even longer, long needed. The city's last full EOA was in 2007. There was some updates in 2011, but as you can imagine, it was a very long period of time that really overall updates were needed. So what you're going to see tonight and what we're going to discuss, it is a complete overhaul. It's a brand new EOA. It's a brand new goal 9 to the comprehensive plan. So that is one thing that we'll kind of touch base with. Matt's team, Matt and Jess are going to go through kind of the EOA process, the BLI, talk a little bit about the comprehensive plan in their slides coming up. But then also I wanted to note that there was some stakeholder engagement that we had throughout this process. We convened a project-specific technical advisory committee that met 3 times in this last year in 2025. And after the work there, moved on to a joint session that we had with the Planning Commission in August of 2025. After that, we requested comments and suggestions and any questions, and those were received by staff. We then took the extra step of reaching out to the Economic Development Division of DLCD to basically give the information to them, have them take a first look at our approach. We got some good feedback throughout that process. This is really the informal review. DLCD does provide a formal review, so it was kind of a sneak peek to them. And I think it was appreciated by both sides to get the comments back, and it also gave them a heads up of what they were expecting when we sent over the full document. So having the staff report, some adjustments that were made to the employment and land demand analysis, also to the buildable lands inventory and the comp plan goals. So a lot of it was just a lot of good recommendations throughout that whole process. A great collaborative effort overall. This project was notified. This meeting was notified in the Columbia Gorge News as well as DLCD following statutory guidelines. No comments have been received in that period of time. The review, I'll touch a little bit on the review that we went through, with any code amendment. We touch on comprehensive plan amendments, Oregon revised statutes, Oregon administrative rules. So that can be found on, is Exhibit A going through each of those, we touched on goal 1 of the comprehensive plan, touched on goal 2, goal 9. Goal 1 is citizen involvement. So this was really talking about that stakeholder engagement that we had throughout the process. Goal 2.
Sorry, real quick. Do you have a PowerPoint that we could get up there?
No, not right now. So I'm going over this high level of the staff report, and then Matt's team is going to take this a little bit further. They're going to touch on a little bit of the stuff that I'm talking about now, but I think that'll be like the best way for our transition.
Okay, cool.
So yeah, we'll kind of get into it. As you can see in Exhibit A, touches on all the different findings throughout, and I think probably the biggest finding that you'll see is when we touch on Goal 9. One thing to keep in, and that is really like an overhaul of our comprehensive plan. Like I said, it was in need of an update. We restructured it different than how it's been. So there's a lot of like. It is a big change, and I think that is the most significant finding that you'll see in these findings. The findings justifying our recommendation to approve this going forward. And I think with that, just kind of give you information in here. We have our Exhibit A is our findings. Exhibits B and C. Exhibit B, that is the what the final comprehensive plan is going to look like in the code when it's all done. Exhibit C are our red lines showing you all the changes that were made, and you're going to see it's entirely brand new, so the whole thing is red, red lined out. And then the actual document, the EOA, that actual package document is Exhibit D. These are all included in your packet. And with that, I am more than happy to pass this over to Matt and Jessa, and they can take it from here.
Awesome. Thank you, Josh. Can y'all hear me okay there in the room? Yeah? I'm gonna assume that's a yes.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. All right, so I am going to share my screen, one of my screens, and walk through a presentation. There's a few places where there'll be some overlap between kind of what Josh covered and what I'll cover, and I'll try not to repeat too much stuff when we get to those points. I assume we'll kind of hold off on questions till the end. I'll also say that I am going to tag team with Jessa, so I'll end up doing probably most of the talking, but luckily for you, she'll jump in the middle and you'll get a little break from me in the middle section there. So first bit, really, Josh kind of covered this. This is just the things that we're going to talk about with you in this as part of this presentation. Not too many next steps. It's basically, from here, if you recommend it, go to the council. That's sort of the next step. So kind of what is an EOA or an economic opportunities analysis? Just a brief summary of that. It is intended to identify the major categories or types of industrial or other employment trends anticipated in the city over the next 20 years, identify how many sites and how much land is needed to accommodate projected employment growth. That's kind of the demand side. And then on the supply side, inventory your supply of buildable land, buildable employment land, compare the demand with the supply. And then, as Josh talked about, update your comprehensive plan based on the results of the EOA. So that's kind of the main purpose here, or the main components. This is just a quick review of the process we went through. We got started back in April of 2025, actually, as Josh said, even earlier. But for this update, this kind of significant overhaul, we did most of the substantive work between April and July of this year, and then spent a fair bit of time making some of the refinements that Josh talked about a couple minutes ago, and now headed into the adoption process. What are kind of our primary goals or objectives of this process? As Josh said, really, it's been a while since the EOA was, and this chapter, your comprehensive plan, has been updated. So we're providing updated data, findings, and recommendations. And that's to help inform future decision making, by the Planning Commission, by the council, by employers and landowners, and to help, serve as a basis for how the city allocates resources in economic development efforts. The city expects to take the results of this and do some shorter term, sort of more immediate planning and strategizing related to economic development. So this provides a basis for that. And it also provides a basis for reviewing future development applications for consistency with comprehensive plan goals and policies. So you've got an updated set of goals and policies to review those things against. This is a little history. I think Josh did a really good job of covering all this. So I'm actually going to kind of skip right on past this because he pretty much talked about all of this. And then I'll kind of start in and I will summarize some of the information in the, again, kind of the demand analysis and the future trends analysis. And then Jessa will talk about the buildable lands inventory. And then I'll kind of finish up with the comparison of the two and talk a little bit about the comprehensive plan updates. So I'll cover these next few slides. Again, some of this Josh talked about already a little bit, a lot of change since the year 2000. We kind of looked at trends both backwards and forwards. So you've seen a lot of diversification in your economy since 2000. Over that period, over the last 20 plus years, the employment there has grown by an annual rate it's grown by about 1.2% per year since 2020. So we're sort of calling that a recovered to that annual rate because there were a lot of things that happened in the mid 2000s and then COVID that really made it tough for you and for other communities throughout the state in terms of economic development. The Oregon Employment Department produces forecasts, and they're predicting employment in the region as a whole is going to grow by just under 1% through 2033. You have seen wage growth. Our wages increase annually during the last 10 years, so that's good news. And you're also seeing the median age trending downwards in the Dalles. That's not necessarily the case in a lot of places, but I think that sort of bodes well in terms of future employment opportunities and the labor market. Again, in terms of those kind of regional projections, you're expected to have about 550 new jobs. A lot of them in service occupations, but also in other categories through about 2033. And I'll say more about employment forecasts in a minute here. In terms of just some trends, here's a couple of graphics that describe trends in terms of on the left, the US, Oregon, and your region in terms of which sectors we've seen employment growth or loss in some cases. And then on the right, I will not read all those, but that's a bunch of different sectors of the economy where you've seen growth both, or not both, but before, through, and after the pandemic. And the pandemic was a big, as everybody knows, event in terms of, employment around the state. So this is sort of a summary of the areas where you've seen some growth and where you might want to continue to sort of focus resources in terms of supporting and attracting employers in those different sectors. So
Sorry to interrupt really quick. Will you
Yeah.
mind making the slide just bigger on the screen?
I cannot really make it bigger on my end because I'm sharing the whole screen and that's the extent of
Can
my
you-
screen. So I don't think I can control that at my end.
Yeah, we're doing it on our end. Sorry,
Okay.
yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
So I was gonna start doing hand signals and stuff, but I was just gonna.
All right. Thank you. Sorry about that. All right. So I'm going to keep rolling. And I've got just a couple more slides, and I'll turn it over to Jessa for a little while. So this is showing job forecasts by sector. And and I'll just note, we have another consulting team member, a woman named Ariane Colombo. She's with a firm called Competinomics. She actually was with the company, it's called Bridge Economic Development, that did the work back in 2019 to 2022. But she was on our team, and she was the one that really focused on kind of the employment trends and forecasting side. So some of this is sort of coming from her. So when I say we, I kind of mean her to some degree, or a large degree on some of this stuff. So We looked at three different employment forecast scenarios. One was that the Dalles gets its sort of proportionate share of the forecasted growth predicted by the Oregon Employment Department. That assumes a moderately low growth rate over the next 20 years of about 0.7% per year. The second scenario is that employment increases along the same trend line as population growth is expected to occur. Population growth is forecasted by the Portland State University Population Research Center, and so they're predicting a higher growth rate in population than OED is predicting in terms of job growth. So that's that kind of middle line. And then the top line is kind of a more, I'll call it aspirational scenario to some degree. And it assumes that you all, work hard and coordinate with others to try to attract and support employers and industries that are in some of those potential target industries that I showed you on the earlier slide. So that's kind of the highest, the dark blue growth line in the forecast on the left. And that's the scenario that we are using in terms of projecting future growth for the purposes of this plan. And then the on the right just shows you sort of what that equates to in terms of a 20-year forecast by sector. And so it assumes an increase in employment of about 2,800 folks or workers, really, I should say, over the next 20 years. So that's what that's showing. And then we translate that employment growth into land need. There's a couple of different ways we did that as part of this process. One is sort of, I will call it kind of the tried and true method that I see in almost every economic opportunities analysis that I've worked on, which is sort of a gross projection. So you take these different sectors, you take the numbers of jobs that are predicted, you average them by a factor that relates to employees per acre, and you come up with a projected acreage need that way. And that assumes a net need of about 100 and just under 150 acres. The second method we employed here was to think about this more in terms of how many sites of different sizes might be needed to accommodate the projected employment growth in various sectors. So commercial sector, industrial, government and institution sector. And each of those kind of bundles up or adds up a number of different specific occupations and employment sectors. Now, in that case, we're seeing potentially the need for, frankly, quite a bit more land because we're assuming that you need a certain number of sites given the size of employers that you have now in the Dalles and you've seen over the last 10 years or so. And when you add that up, it's a much bigger number, frankly. That's sort of, I'm going to say, the best analysis we can do with the information we have available. It's pretty rough. And there is a pretty big delta between kind of those two different approaches to estimating future land need. And somewhere in the middle of that is kind of likely, I don't know exactly the middle, but somewhere between those two numbers is what you're likely to need over the next 20 years in terms of land need. So I will stop there. And Jessa is going to now talk about kind of the supply side, what the buildable lands inventory findings were, and then we'll circle back to me to finish things up.
Great. Thank you, Matt, and good evening, everyone. So as Matt just mentioned, I'm going to spend the next few minutes in slides diving into the second main phase of this process, which was the Refined Employment Buildable Land Inventory, or BLI, which looks at the supply of employment lands in the Dalles and how this compares to the employment demand that Matt just summarized from the Refined Employment Forecast and Land Needs Analysis. So to start, this process refines the BLI from the 2020 Economic Opportunity Analysis to reflect new conditions such as recent development, tax law changes, new constraints such as the city's new stream corridor buffers, and updated FEMA floodplain data, and multiple rounds of staff, public advisory and committee, and elected official feedback to ensure an accurate reflection of developable employment lands in the city. The BLI update was composed of 5 main steps, which are shown here on this slide, and they are also summarized in detail in the DLI memo included in today's meeting packet. These steps include determining land type for all tax lots at the Dalles to focus in on employment lands, identifying and calculating constraints such as steep slopes, floodplain, wetlands, stream corridors, easements, etc., classifying land by development status, inventorying these results to calculate developable employment land, and then lastly, comparing land demand or land need or demand with the supply of buildable land that was found by the BLI. Next slide, please. So as I just mentioned, one of the main steps of the BLI was to classify the city's employment land by development status. The BLI includes 5 different land classifications, which are defined on the slide, including developed, so sites with improvements and little to no additional capacity for development, vacant sites, so those with minimal to no physical improvements, partially vacant sites, so those with some improvements, but still enough capacity for additional development, committed sites, which are those that are either vacant or partially vacant, but reserved for or committed to non-employment uses, or cannot be developed for an employment use during the planning period. One example of this would be federally owned properties in the Dalles, such as those owned by the U.S. Postal Service. And I will also note that within your meeting packet, there is a summary of all the committed sites that are identified in the BLI. And then lastly, we have constrained sites, which are those that are completely constrained by specific features or hazards that have 0 unconstrained acreage and therefore no developable employment land. So I already went through this a little bit already, but this slide further breaks down the methodology that was used for the BLI. So we started with all land in the urban growth boundary and the removed land zone for residential and other non-employment uses to get the city's total employment lands. From this, we then removed land that is developed or committed to public facilities or other uses. And then from that, we then removed constraints or constrained land as well as land needed for streets and infrastructure to land at the city's net buildable acres of employment land or the employment land supply. Next slide, please. So these next few slides will provide a series of maps that kind of walk us through that process visually. So first we have a map of the city's zoning, which informed what was identified as employment lands that are shown on this next map. And then, so here you can see the lands that we identified as employment lands in blue, and then those identified as residential in yellow, and those identified as other in gray. So this analysis focused on those sites identified in blue, which are largely located along the Columbia River. Next slide, please. Then this next map shows the development constraints that were removed to calculate the city's unconstrained employment land. So in purple, we have those stream corridor 50-foot buffer areas. In blue, we have wetlands. In orange, we have steep slopes. In very bright blue, we have BPA rights of way. And then kind of in that turquoise color, we have FEMA flood hazard areas. So all of these lands impacted by these constraints were not incorporated in the total developable acreage calculations.
I'm going to interrupt and add something real quick. Sorry, Jessa.
Mhm.
And just, Josh noted earlier that we sent this work over to the state to have their economic development specialists take a look at it. And one of the things they commented on was, 20 slopes of 25%. I mean, that is sort of a safe harbor when we look at constrained land. And their comment was, you don't have to hit 25% for something to be constrained for employment uses. And so we did some spot checking of land in the inventory that's employment land, and frankly, most of that is on much lower slopes than that. So there really weren't many areas that were above, let's say, 7% slopes in the employment land inventory, because as Jessa said, most of it's close to the river. It's much flatter down there than up in the hills, on the kind of eastern and southern portions of the city. So I just wanted to note that the 25% is sort of our baseline for taking stuff out, but we did take a look at slopes in a little more detail than that based on what we heard from the folks at the state. So just a quick note or not super quick, but all right, I will
Great,
move
thank you,
on.
Matt. You
Yep.
can go to the next slide. Okay, and then this last map shows how the city's employment land was classified into those different development types that I just went over a few minutes ago. So the pink shows committed sites, blue shows constrained sites, orange shows developed sites, and then yellow shows partially vacant sites, and then lastly, green shows vacant sites. So once all mapping was completed and the sites were classified, we then summarized the aggregate land findings. So the table on this slide shows the gross and net developable acres of employment land within the Dalles broken down by zone. I'm not going to go into each of the zones today, but these tables are all included in your packet that was provided. But it shows that there's an estimated 262.5 gross acres of vacant or partially vacant employment land in the Dalles. The gross acreage also accounts for a reduction in 10 acres of available land on sites owned by Google based on their lower assumed employment densities. We also then calculated net acreage, and as a result, there's an estimated 204.8 acres available for employment land after accounting for existing development on partially vacant sites and then set-asides for infrastructure and setbacks on vacant land. And then with that, I think I'm going to hand it over to Matt, who's going to discuss needs for sites of different sizes and also some key takeaways about the comparison between demand and supply.
Yep. Thanks, Jessa. So this table is just kind of summarizing the number of sites within the city in different size ranges. So we summarize that information in kind of the top part of this table, and then our colleague Ariane identified estimated needed numbers of sites in these same different size categories. And so what you're seeing here at the bottom of the table is, do you have a surplus or a deficit of needed sites in these different size categories? And what she's showing is a deficit in virtually every category, that you don't have enough just purely numbers of properties to meet the projected employment need in terms of the sizes of sites that are typically required for various employment sectors in the Dalles. And again, that's kind of based on the patterns of development that have occurred and the conditions on the ground there. So what that ends up showing is that you saw kind of earlier on, I noted that net demand, if you just kind of take almost like an aggregate average of land, we showed the need for about 150 acres. You have a surplus if you're just looking at it from that perspective. But if you're looking at this from a site needs perspective, we're seeing that you don't frankly have enough land to meet the future demand for employment land. So that's kind of our key takeaway here, is that even though we're showing an aggregate surplus, and it's not a huge aggregate surplus, about 50 acres or a little more, you really, we think, have a deficit in terms of the number of sites needed, and that translates to a deficit in acreage for the next 20 years. And we just kind of included a quote here that the lack of sites over 20 acres in size in particular is a detriment to business recruitment and expansion areas in industrial sectors where they need, frankly, larger pieces of land. So, and that echoes some of what we heard during the advisory committee process that we had with folks. So wanted to note that. I am now going to move on to kind of the last bit of this, which is to talk about the comprehensive plan revisions that are being recommended. So just first, just a little bit of an overview. So one, we've got the EOA and the findings from the EOA and the information from the EOA that talks about projected employment and land needs. We've then got the parts that Jessica covered that talk about the supply of land. So that's a key element that we're summarizing ultimately in the comprehensive plan. And then in terms of policies, the policies are meant to implement or achieve the findings in the EOA. We've got policies that are around designating an adequate number of employment sites and also providing public facilities and transportation facilities. Your comprehensive plan also includes implementation measures associated with specific policies. So you'll see that. The other thing that you'll be doing over time to implement the EOA is potentially plan and zoning map and text amendments. We're not proposing any of those kind of amendments at this time, but that's something that could happen in the future based on applications or proposals from property owners. We did take kind of a high level look at your development code, and we didn't see anything that was really out of whack in terms of implementing the EOA. But again, there may be some text amendments around that in the future. So in terms of the revisions, the proposed revisions to the comprehensive plan, as Josh said, it's kind of a wholesale replacement. Because the information, the narrative information in the current comp plan is so out of date, there's not really much left in there that's still relevant. So we've basically just drafted kind of a whole new set of narrative, and that narrative summarizes the work we've done. And then the supporting EOA and associated materials are referenced as supporting elements of your comprehensive plan. So reorganize the narrative. And then also, and when I say we here on the goals, policies, and implementation strategies, staff, Josh and Jacob, did really an excellent job of kind of reorganizing and reformulating those. And so those are really pretty much a replacement of what was previously in your comprehensive plan as well. So pretty much a brand new economic element, as Josh said. I will just give you just a little more background on this and a couple of examples. So the way this is organized, similar to other elements of your comp plan, is into goals, and then under each goal is a set of policies, and under each policy is a set of implementation measures. That's kind of that's the framework. These are the 7 goals. I will not read all these, but they're pretty broad goals. And again, under each of them, you've got policies and implementation measures. And I will just walk through a couple quick examples of how that plays out within the document, and then I'll wrap it up. So this is an example from goal 1. So a goal 1 is to expand and diversify the economic base. And one of the policies in there really talks about protecting and planning for long-term the long-term supply of industrial land. And then there's several implementation measures underneath that policy. So preserving key industrial areas such as the portlands, creating policies to avoid conversion of industrial land and non-industrial uses, because it's important to retain those industrially zoned properties to the extent that industrial lands are lost to redevelopment, having a strategy for replacing that supply, and then just generally increasing the supply of industrial sites so you can attract some of the larger industries within those target industries or occupations. So that's kind of one example. And then I've got an example under goal 4. Goal 4 says ensure economic development readiness and resilience. Couple of policies under here and the implementation measures under them. So 4.1 is make it easier to develop land in the Dalles. And there's several implementation measures here, streamlining your processes for land use permitting, including expansions and reuse, providing pre-development assistance. So somebody's looking to redevelop a site, provide some support for that, particularly for catalytic sites, sites that are basically have the potential to catalyze additional development in other parts of the city or in other sectors. And then regularly update the resources on the city's website so people are kind of aware of what the opportunities are. And then policy 4.2 talks about planning for long-term resilience and adaptability. And then again, several implementation measures there. One, incorporating hazard mitigation, so mitigating hazards related to flooding or erosion or things like that, as well as redundant utilities as you're planning for infrastructure and land use. Encouraging strategies that incorporate infrastructure layouts, long-term adaptability as industries' needs change. And then finally, keeping track of how you're doing, monitoring and reporting progress using different types of economic metrics or measures, land absorption, job growth, et cetera. So those are a few examples of some of the, again, goals, policies, and implementation measures you'll find in this updated comprehensive plan. And there's a whole bunch more, so I will not go through all of those. That was my last slide. Happy to answer any questions or just hear any comments or suggestions y'all have. And I'm also happy to stop sharing this unless somebody wants me to go back to something, and then I can keep it up there.
Okay. Do you guys have any questions or anything? Okay, Jared, go ahead. Make sure you unmute yourself.
Of course. Jared Gossin, Planning Commission member. I just had one question about some of these changes. Was there any particular changes around like water safety in these industrial zones that were removed? In particular, around environmental hazards with the industrial zones? I'm just not sure if there's any, what do you call it? Environmental or health protections in there that were made way as part of this new planning, or if those are kept in place.
I'll try to answer that, and then I'll see if Josh or Jess have anything to add. So I guess a couple of things. One of the things we did, and Jess had touched on it briefly, was we updated the buildable lands inventory to reflect your current regulations or requirements in terms of buffer areas related to streams or riparian corridors. So that was a change since the last update to the buildable lands inventory. The other thing that we did was we incorporated updated floodplain maps from FEMA. So both of those things were updated, and those do reflect, kind of regulations around and impacts of those resources on development capacity. So in both of those cases, what we're doing is identifying where those conditions occur, where those stream buffers are, and where those floodplains are, and saying, hey, from a capacity standpoint, those areas don't, they're not considered capacity for future employment. And then the city at the same time has development code regulations around the ability to develop in those areas. So that's one thing we did. I don't think in terms of kind of the goals and policies in the plan, we didn't eliminate anything that would kind of relate directly to that. And then finally, we didn't recommend any changes to your development code that would affect those things. We're assuming you continue to regulate land use and development consistent with those types of protections, I guess I would say. So I don't know if that totally gets at what you're asking, but that's
It does.
what I can say. Okay,
Thank you.
perfect. Yeah, no worries.
Go ahead.
I don't know if this is the right time, but I had three sort of minor suggestions in the sort of policy and implementation pieces. The first one was in policy 1.2 around entrepreneurship, innovation, and business startups. I'd really like to see some maybe more flexible language around support for, and I know this is support for like business support services, especially thinking about diverse populations that may be looking to start or grow a business in the community. I don't see any language in there around that, and I think it's important to think about the different paths folks take in making that choice, and the ways that the community can support them.
Awesome.
And then the next one was on policy 2.2. Just around the hospital relocation, I appreciate that's a big conversation in the community and an important one. And I'd like to see some direct language talking about support for redevelopment of the existing site. If there is a shift in that location, knowing that that's a pretty significant chunk of land for our community with a lot of constraints around access and things like that. And then the last one was on 5.3. That first implementation measure, I'd like to see a little broader language. It specifically calls Google out there, and that's fine. But I think noting there are other tech companies in the community and the region that we could be looking to collaborate with, and that focusing specifically on Google there seems a little bit limiting to me.
Yeah, so just kind of include some broader language around that.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And those were the three I jotted down. A lot of appreciation to staff and the other folks that had input into those. I think that the goals and implementation pieces are looking really good. I feel like
Awesome. Well,
appreciate
again,
that.
I really, most of that credit goes to Josh and Jake on that. So
Yeah.
yeah, thank you.
To those points, as far as this evening, Commissioner Pipinich, would you feel comfortable with us trying to wordsmith something now? And, I mean, that can happen. This is the planning commission's opportunity to make these final tweaks before it goes to city council. And if that's,
And I
yeah.
think that I'll just toss in another alternative just for the sake of, consideration. And that would be that, I mean, I think you gave us some good direction. And maybe there's something in the motion that says, update those three implementation measures and those three policies to achieve these things that you talked about. And then we could craft something, and bring that to council. So that would just be another option instead of trying to, it's always to me hard to wordsmith something in a setting like this, but not that we couldn't do it, or try
Well,
it, but that's just another option. So sorry,
I mean, I
Josh.
didn't really want to, but
I mean, I'm trusting of you all to take that feedback and implement it. I don't feel the need to wordsmith it here unless somebody else does. If that's a potential path, I'm comfortable with that.
yeah, we can. And if a motion is made, then I would then recommend number 2 on here on this, and it's basically it would be a modified comprehensive plan with after adopting any changed amendments or findings, unless the city attorney is the city attorney is okay with us adopting it through that motion and making the changes after the fact before it goes to city council.
Yeah, that's fine. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yep.
Perfect. Yeah, that's fine. I would just ask, be very clear, get it on the record exactly what your intended change is or modification is. And then we'll write it up to ensure that it's accurately reflecting the intent of the commission, of course. And so I would ask, if that is the way that anybody wants to go tonight, just make it really clear that when you're making that motion, that that's your intent is to make a specific change or changes, and to be clear about what they are, and then we'll take care of it on the back end.
Okay, so would you mind saying again which policy numbers
Yeah.
and the specifics that you would like change with them?
To do it again.
I mean, I have the policy numbers 1.2, 2.2, and 5.3.
Okay.
And 1.2, some clarification, additional support services for entrepreneurs. Is that something you were targeting?
Yeah, diverse entrepreneurs.
So what, just say something like support diversity in entrepreneurship, innovation, and business startups?
That's great.
Okay. And then
And
excuse
then
me, no, support a diverse,
And again,
support diverse entrepreneurship, innovation, and business startups. Because that, in that way, diverse means anything. Yeah. In a good way. What's the next one?
policy 2.2, maybe just some additional language at the end of that, continue multi-partner effort to relocate the hospital to a more central location and support redevelopment of the existing site. And then 5.3, maybe it's just collaborate with Google, other, I mean, I think it could
Technology.
even just be other private industry, CGCC and STEM organizations.
I make a suggestion on that 5.3. As we are explicitly stating company names or organizations or what is STEM for lack of a better word?
Yeah. Focus area.
Focus area, yeah, sure. I would say collaborate with the following, but include but not limited to, or something like that. Then maybe you could even do like a include but not limited to these and other related or similar industries or policies. Just
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah, we can add some language, come up with some language that does that.
Thank you for the suggestions. Then we got a hand raised too.
Yep.
Okay, another. Go ahead, Jared.
Yeah, just on maybe something to help with alleviating this text. Maybe we could just add at the end of the existing one and other community partners. It seems like it's something that would include additional partners who would come in, whether it's educational or commercial or just anyone who's willing to partner. That might be which that we're trying to target if everyone thinks that's good.
I guess I tend to think of community partners often meaning like public or nonprofit. And I think I'm specifically interested in engagement with other private sector technology related businesses rather than just Google. I mean, not that the other partners would be more than welcome to the table and excited to see that engagement, but
And there are other policies around
yeah.
Coordinating with other more kind of institutional and nonprofit.
Yeah.
I'll just note. So
Yeah.
Yeah. Typically, when you say partner, you're referring to partner agencies, like you said, nonprofit, other government agencies, stuff like that. Okay. Any other thoughts, additions, questions, alterations?
I appreciate you speaking up because I think those three are great. And I was concerned about the Google part because, yeah, you are pointing out one particular one.
Okay. Does commission have any other questions for staff at this time? No, all good. Does anyone from the public wish to offer relevant testimony or ask relevant questions on this matter for up to 3 minutes? If so, please state your name and address for the record. And we have no one's here aside from our darling Matt Klebs, and no one in the audience either. So do the commissioners feel they have enough information to make a decision? I do as well. Ready for deliberations then? I am. Public testimony portion of the hearing is now closed. and then we'll just proceed with deliberations. I personally have nothing to deliberate. Commissioner Grant also says no. Maria says no. Jacob, are you all good? Excuse me, Jared, I mean. There's a couple J's up there.
Yeah, yes, I'm as good as I can be, though unfortunately I didn't get this packet until today, so I wasn't able to fully review it.
It's okay. Excuse me. In that case, may I please request that someone, one of the commissioners, make a motion. The resolutions are on page 19 of the packet. And believe we discussed, not to influence anyone's next sentence, number 2, move to recommend with variations.
I would move to recommend to City Council the approval of a modified comprehensive plan amendment 58-25 after adopting the proposed changed amendments or findings discussed at the regular February 5th, 2026 Planning Commission meeting.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion to move to recommend the city council, to the city council the modified comprehensive plan amendment 58-25. That motion has been seconded. All in favor of approving that motion and raise your right hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That is unanimous.
I just want to
Oh,
clarify.
Jared, will you unmute
Commissioner
yourself,
Gossen.
please?
Oh, I was just going to abstain mostly because I couldn't read everything in the packet, so.
Okay, apologies. We have 4 ayes and one abstain. Okay. Next on the agenda, we have an action item.
Just real quick,
Oh, sorry.
just to close this all down, appreciate Matt and Jessa's time this evening. We'll be moving forward. We'll make these changes. We'll be moving this process forward to the February 23rd City Council meeting. So I will see you both then. We'll probably touch base before. Have a
Awesome.
good evening.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you
you,
both.
Matt.
Yep.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Okay, next item, action item, adoption of resolution PC 632-26, granting a time extension for conditional use permit number 213-25.
Thank you, Chair Cornett. As mentioned, this next item is a request for a time extension for CUP 213-25. The applicant here is the City of the Dalles, and we have a representative for the city, and the city manager is sitting behind me. If there's any questions at the end, he might be able to answer them for you. So background here is CUP 213-25 was approved by the Planning Commission about 364 days ago on February 6th, 2025. And this was, at that time, the Planning Commission voted unanimously to approve this request. This was for the construction, or the demolition of 2 structures that are up in the parking lot, in the library parking lot, and the construction of a new facilities building. And this would be, consolidating the city's maintenance division, operations, and provide storage for the Dalles Wasco County Library and Friends of the Dalles Library Book Barn. And the process is to at that time is to establish a community facilities overlay. So this was approved. We're bringing it back because conditional use permits expire after one year unless construction is moving forward. So looking at the review criteria, this is really a condensed, almost like a memo for y'all. Review criteria, all the same review criteria that was applied has been applied. It is still consistent. All those findings and conditions are still applied to that application. Nothing is changing this evening. As a result, this is really just a discussion on a timeline extension, a formality, if you will. So Exhibit B has been provided here, and that is the notice of decision from the previous application. So going through it, and as I mentioned, the Planning Commission, there's conditions, and those conditions they still apply. There are no changes to the approved plans. Those conditions, you can see a complete list of those as in Exhibit A. I do have a typo here. My apologies. From here on out, my findings got a little wonky, so I renumbered it. But in any case, the next step is then going through section 10.3.50.70, and this really talks about, this breaks down the request, the requirement that we would review for an extension here. The first is really talking about unavoidable delay and extended schedule. Due to project delays beyond the city's control, they are requesting this extension. These include increased costs due to federal tariffs affecting steel and other construction materials, as well as some additional conversations with the library about some long-term operational needs. So these were unavoidable, which has delayed the project. I'm looking again at consistency with the approved conditional use permit. As I mentioned, there is no change to the plans. This is really just a timeline extension. Also, a performance guarantee. The Planning Commission may require a performance guarantee for this. This is typically applied to applicants. Staff is not recommending any performance guarantee. The applicant is the city, so we do not recommend one. It is up to the commission's. You do retain the discretion to make that if you choose to. This evening, staff is not recommending that. And also, this timely request. The applicant, the city, did submit in a timely request. It has been provided as Exhibit C that was submitted before the 1-year timeline. So at the end of the day, staff's recommendation is to adopt resolution number 632-26, which is approving this 1-year extension. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from anybody on this?
I do have one. Can I? So the extension is 1 year. So do we know when this is gonna start happening?
I think that is a perfect segue for the city manager to answer that question, and he's sitting right behind me.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Yes, Commissioner Cornett, Chair. My name is Matthew Cleves. I'm the city manager for the city of the Dalles. Josh is 100% correct. Last year, we encountered some difficulties, in particular with steel prices and some of the tariffs that impacted those prices, and we decided to wait on the project, hoping costs would go down and would change. Things are looking better, not necessarily for steel, but for some other dynamics with the building that we may be able to move forward with. That being said, one of the other components here that will prevent me from saying like a specific start date, we're still coordinating with the library and the library board. The library board has had some discussions about some alternative ideas there that we want to make sure that we work through with them before we move forward. The city needs and absolutely requires a maintenance building. We've been in the basement here at City Hall. It's a little terrifying. And so we need a proper space to store our materials, to store our vehicles, secure a safe environment. So it's something that we have budgeted for and will budget for in the upcoming fiscal year cycle. But frankly, I don't have a specific date that we would break ground. I want to make sure we do our diligence and finish those conversations.
Sure. Thank you. Any other questions for City Manager Klebs? Thank you kindly. I have no other questions for the staff regarding this extension. Okay. If no one else does either, may I please have, will someone please make a motion? The motion language is on page 158 of the packet. Go ahead there, Jared.
You said page 158.
158 of the packet, that's right.
Uh, Sorry, I was looking to make that motion and then it doesn't look like I've got the exact text, so I'll let
I
someone
got
else do it.
You got it.
Right. I move the Planning Commission to adopt Resolution PC 625-25 or is that correct? It's not.
Oh, sorry, it's 26. 6
Oh, it's a different, yeah.
2-26.
Yes. Okay, so let me start over on that one. I move for the Planning Commission to adopt Resolution PC 632-26, granting a time extension for the conditional use permit number 213-25.
Motion has been made. May I have a second?
Second.
Second has been made. All in favor of adopting resolution 632-26, granting the extension for conditional use permit number 213-25, raise your right hand and say aye.
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 I have
Aye.
a question though. Do we have to say how long is the extension or no?
The extension is 1 year, and that is just by the nature of a conditional use permit.
Sorry.
Okay. So all ayes?
Aye.
All ayes. Okay. Thank you all. Moving on to B, consideration to adopt amendments to the Dalles Planning Commission bylaws.
Great. Thank you again. This next item is really kind of finishing up the overall cycle that we've been going through of the past couple months of some planning commission restructuring updates. So similar to other public boards and commissions, the planning commission operates under adopted set of bylaws. We adopted the planning commission last completed a comprehensive bylaw update in 2023. Which this really focused on primarily on procedural updates related to the COVID-19 pandemic, creating some more flexibility around some virtual participation, attendance expectations, meeting decorum. Since that time, the city has completed a two-phase reorganization of the Planning Commission, the first being General Ordinance 25-1422, which was adopted in November. And that's what restructured the schedule of the Planning Commission ultimately to really, that was one of the big points to it, of 1 meeting a month. And then also phase 2 implemented the hearings officer system, and this was adopted at the January 12th City Council meeting. So really, this is a follow-up to that work overall. The proposed amendments here generally address the following areas: reorganization and clarification of the bylaws for readability, internal consistency, ease of reference, additional alignment with bylaws and Oregon revised statutes and applicable provisions of the Dalles Municipal Code. Clarification of the roles and authority of the procedures following the adoption of the hearings officer system. Some additional refinements to meeting procedures, quorum requirements, voting standards, updates to public hearing procedures, public comment, and then some expanded and clarified ethics, conflict of interest, and hearing and quasi-judicial hearing provisions. Overall, this does not change the overall function of the Planning Commission. This is really just something that is formalizing these code amendments that have been made in the past couple months. So really, this is largely administrative in nature. It does not have to go to City Council by any means. So it is something that is approved this evening, and if it is approved this evening, it's really going into future handbooks for the Planning Commission. Those are the rules that we'll be moving forward with. So staff's recommendation: move to adopt the proposed Planning Commission bylaws as presented.
Okay. Any thoughts or questions on this from the commissioners? Okay, this, as far as I'm concerned, this is all stuff that we've been warming up to for the past few meetings / months, etc. So I am also okay with it. So if no one has any qualms or adjustments, may I please have a motion and a second? The motion language is on page 163.
I would move to adopt the proposed planning commission bylaws as presented.
Motion's been made.
I second. Jared
And
Goss.
it has been seconded. All in favor of moving to adopt the proposed planning commission bylaws as presented, raise your right hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That is unanimous, all five. Thank you very much, everyone. We are moving on to staff comments and project updates. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. I think I'm going to go over just a couple things here. Won't keep you too long. I do want to make a note here just for the record. I got my numbers a little screwed up when I was putting the resolutions together. So in your packet, the resolution that was tied to the EOA was incorrectly titled as 632-26. That's actually the one for this most recent update to the CUP. However, the document that you'll be signing this evening, Chair Cornett, I've already made the change there. So just for the record, everybody knows that that is a typo in there. Aside from that, there is excited to announce that we are in the process of reviewing the Chenoweth Loop affordable housing project over on the west side of town. So that is in the queue right now. I'm working with our public works department to go through the plans. That project, as I may have mentioned, has received funding approval at the state level. So they're just going through the steps on our end. Once they have that, they'll be moving forward. They're hoping to, it's sounding like maybe summertime, that they might start doing some construction out there. It's exciting stuff. Mentioned we have recently implemented the hearings officer system. So our internal team will start working in the next couple weeks through that selection process in the hopes of having that hearings officer in place by mid-April. And then we're looking at, some work over this next year, part of restructuring planning commission and getting the hearings officer is to do some more of that long range planning work with the planning commission. So our team is taking a look right now at some middle housing amendments, code amendments. This will be, touching on a lot of things. What it's ultimately doing is it's expanding housing choices in the Dalles, making it a little easier. We're finding, we always bump into some barriers here or there that makes it a little difficult to develop for one reason or another because the code can be so strict on certain things. So we're trying to open up, get some more flexibility there. And a lot of this, this is really guided through the housing production strategy. This is one of our actions to address the middle housing amendment. So the hope is it might be a little soon to be at the next meeting, but the hope is at the latest we'll have a discussion, at least a high level discussion with the Planning Commission at some point in April. And other than that, happy to answer any questions, but that's all I got.
Okay. You guys got any questions? Does the commission have any comments or questions otherwise?